Sir, this isn't an open exhibition. The man's voice rang out, deep and cutting. These aircraft cost more than most people make in a lifetime. Security will escort you out unless you have legitimate business here. Blake Harrington's words echoed across the pristine showroom of Apex Aeronautics, where multi-million-dollar private jets gleamed under crystal chandeliers. He stepped between the bearded man in weathered travel clothes and the $4.2 million Cessna Citation, his expression a blend of disdain and the smug authority of someone who assumed his judgment was fact. Hamza Qureshi looked up from examining the aircraft's avionics display, his calloused hands resting calmly at his sides. The faint scent of cardamom lingered on his clothes, a trace of the tea he'd sipped that morning. Behind him, dust from his worn leather boots had left light marks on the marble floor, evidence Blake decided was enough to confirm his assumptions. "I'm here to purchase an aircraft for my business operations," Hamza said quietly, his voice carrying the patience of a man accustomed to having to explain himself where others never needed to. Blake's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Right. And I'm sure you've got the $3 million just lying around somewhere." The room seemed to hold its breath. A few customers exchanged glances, while others slowly raised their phones, the allure of witnessing a confrontation too tempting to ignore. Have you ever been treated like you don't belong around expensive things simply because of your appearance? The digital clock above the reception desk read 4:15 p.m. A brass plaque near the entrance declared, "Apex Aeronautics, showroom hours. Closes at 6 p.m., weekend viewings by appointment only." Nina Calderon, a young sales associate, had been live-streaming a tour of their newest arrivals for the company's Instagram when the confrontation started. Her phone now captured every word as she tried to maintain her composure while watching clear prejudice unfold. "These aircraft require serious financial verification before we allow close inspection," Blake continued, stepping further into Hamza's path. "We've had incidents, people taking photos for insurance scams or pretending to be buyers." From the corner office, Sales Director Vanessa Morgan emerged, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. 15 years in luxury sales had taught her to read a room quickly, but she was already influenced by Blake's framing of the situation. "Is there an issue here?" she asked in a tone that was outwardly professional, yet her posture mirrored Blake's assumption. "This gentleman is asking to examine our premium aircraft without going through the proper verification process," Blake explained, gesturing casually toward Hamza, as if that were the end of the discussion. "I was reminding him of our protocols." Hamza reached into his jacket, producing a sleek leather wallet. From it, he retrieved his driver's license and a corporate credit card embossed with his company's logo in gold. "I'm more than willing to provide identification and proof of purchasing ability," he said. Blake gave the cards a quick, almost disinterested glance. "Sir, anyone can print a business card these days. We require verified financial statements, bank letters, full credit applications, before anyone is allowed near multi-million-dollar jets." Before we proceed further, I want to take a moment to invite you to be part of something bigger than just this story. If what you've heard so far has made you feel, think, or reflect, even for a moment, then hit that like button so more people can discover voices like these. Subscribe to Muslim Stories Unheard so you never miss the next untold truth waiting to be heard. And if you've lived through moments of bias, resilience, faith, or triumph, or even witnessed them, share your experience in the comments. Let's get back to our story. The words sounded official, but Nina had seen well-dressed clients, most of them white, many of them male, wander freely through the showroom for hours without so much as signing a form. A couple across the room, dressed in tailored blazers, was examining the cockpit of a King Air turboprop, flicking switches and opening compartments without any interference. "The rules seem selective," Hamza said evenly, nodding toward them. "They're established clients," Vanessa replied quickly. "Different protocols for trusted customers than for walk-ins." Nina's live stream viewer count spiked, 287, then 543 and climbing. Comments began to flood in. "This is disgusting. Classic double standard. He's Muslim, that's why." And still, the confrontation continued. "Let the man look at the planes. Where is this happening?" A wealthy retired couple approached from the Gulfstream display area, the husband's wrist sporting a Rolex worth more than most cars. They'd been quietly observing the exchange with growing discomfort. "Excuse me," the woman said to Vanessa, "but we've been browsing for over an hour without filling out a single form. Maybe you could extend the same courtesy to this gentleman." Blake's jaw tightened, irritation flickering across his face. "Ma'am, we appreciate your concern, but we have established security protocols to protect high-value inventory." "Security protocols?" Hamza repeated evenly. "Against potential time wasters. Against people who clearly can't afford our aircraft," Blake replied, the filter finally slipping. "Look, this isn't a car lot. These machines cost real money, serious money." The casual cruelty of the statement struck the room like a slap. Nina's phone captured Blake's dismissive gesture, his unwillingness to even consider that a man in scuffed boots and a neatly trimmed beard might legitimately afford luxury aircraft. Hamza's phone buzzed in his pocket. Aviation Procurement Board, 5:30 p.m. Another alert appeared. Fleet maintenance inspection, King Air scheduled tomorrow. Without glancing at the screen, he silenced the device, keeping his focus locked on the man in front of him. "I understand aviation costs," Hamza said, his professional composure intact despite the public humiliation. "I'm familiar with aircraft operations, maintenance requirements, and purchasing procedures." "Sure you are," Blake scoffed. "Let me guess, you're a pilot too?" The question dripped with sarcasm, but Hamza simply nodded. "ADP rated. 8,400 flight hours." Vanessa laughed aloud. "Right. And I suppose you've got your own hangar too." By now, Nina's live stream had surged past 2,000 viewers. Aviation enthusiasts were joining in, commenting on the technical precision in Hamza's earlier questions despite the staff's thinly veiled contempt. A young professional in a tailored suit walked up, frustration clear on his face. "This is absurd. The man clearly knows what he's talking about. I've been listening to him discuss avionics and engine specs with more accuracy than most pilots I know." "Sir, please don't interfere with our customer service procedures," Blake said coldly. "We have protocols for a reason." "Your protocols seem selective," the man replied, pulling out his phone to record. "I've watched him ask questions that would stump most pilots." The showroom was splitting into two camps: customers who applauded the staff's so-called vigilance, and those who recognized exactly what was happening. Nina's camera caught every comment, every side-eyed glance, every ounce of institutional bias as it unfolded in real time. "Timestamp, 75 minutes to closing," she murmured into her phone for her swelling audience. "This has been going on for over 20 minutes now." From the turboprop section, an older gentleman in a worn flight jacket and aviator sunglasses approached. "Son, I couldn't help overhearing your conversation about the King Air. You sound like you know those aircraft pretty well." "I've flown them extensively," Hamza replied. "Reliable machines for agricultural operations." "Agricultural operations?" Blake cut in, feigning surprise. "Oh, so now you're what? Some crop duster." The mocking tone revealed Blake's ignorance of agricultural aviation, a multi-billion-dollar industry requiring sophisticated aircraft and highly skilled pilots. But his prejudice blinded him, leaving him unable, or unwilling, to recognize expertise that didn't fit his narrow assumptions about who belongs in this showroom. Vanessa checked her watch, the unease clear in her expression. Weekend sales figures were scrutinized by corporate, and this escalating scene was eating up valuable selling time while rapidly becoming a public relations nightmare. "Sir, perhaps we could arrange an appointment for next week. Give you time to prepare the proper documentation?" she suggested, her voice tight with the effort of sounding professional. "I'm prepared today," Hamza replied. "I have time right now to discuss aircraft options for fleet expansion." "Fleet expansion?" Blake's laughter rang out, loud enough to draw glances from across the showroom. "What fleet?" "Your imaginary, what, desert air taxi service." Nina's live stream had swelled to 1,847 viewers, with aviation industry professionals starting to pick up on the fact that the man being dismissed wasn't just some casual browser. But no one, except Hamza, knew what was coming next. The digital wall clock blinked to 4:45 p.m. outside, as a black BMW slid into the executive parking spot. Regional Sales Manager Daniel Mercer had arrived, his unscheduled weekend inspections designed to keep standards high during peak sales hours. The overhead PA chimed. 60 minutes to closing. Weekend performance under corporate review. Mercer entered the showroom, his 20 years in luxury aviation sales instantly picking up on the tension crackling in the air. He strode toward the cluster gathered around the citation, exuding the calm authority of someone who could handle a crisis. "What's happening here?" he asked, his tone clipped but controlled. Staff members straightened reflexively. Blake wasted no time justifying himself. "Daniel, we've got a potential time-waster situation. Individual claims pilot credentials and purchasing ability, but refuses, or can't, produce the proper verification paperwork." Mercer nodded gravely, shifting into corporate damage control mode. The fact that half the crowd had their phones up, and that Nina's live stream was still rolling, should have given him pause. But ingrained assumptions overpowered situational awareness. Nina's audience ticked past 2,400, with comments flooding in from pilots and civil rights advocates alike, calling out the clear profiling. "Sir, I'm Daniel Mercer, Regional Sales Manager," he said with polished formality. "I understand there's been some confusion about our aircraft viewing procedures." "No confusion," Hamza replied, his voice steady despite watching his credibility dismantled in public. "I expressed interest in examining aircraft for potential purchase. Your staff assumed I couldn't afford them. Unfortunately, we do get a lot of individuals who visit these showrooms for the novelty, not actual purchasing intent," Mercer said, raising his voice so it carried to the crowd. "Our qualification process is in place to protect both our clients and our inventory." Through the side entrance, Security Chief Anthony Vega entered, his presence making the interaction feel less like a sales consultation and more like a security incident. His radio crackled with updates from the monitoring room. "Chief Vega, we may need assistance here," Mercer announced, escalating the situation. "What's the problem?" Vega asked, approaching with the caution of a man who'd seen disputes spiral before. "Customer claims pilot credentials and purchasing capacity without providing supporting documentation," Blake explained, his confidence swelling under supervisory backup. "Could be a competitor fishing for specs. Could be prepping for an insurance fraud scheme." The accusations were becoming wilder, more damaging by the minute. Nina's camera caught it all, the systematic public takedown of a customer whose only offense was having the wrong appearance for a luxury aircraft showroom. From the Gulfstream section, a poised woman in an emerald dress approached, her husband just behind her. Dr. Patricia Owens, a renowned cardiac surgeon, looked ready to end the nonsense. "Excuse me," she said sharply, "but I've been listening to this gentleman's questions. He has more aviation knowledge than most pilots I've met." "Ma'am, we appreciate your observation," Mercer replied smoothly. "But we have established procedures for high-value transactions that require proper verification." "What verification?" Dr. Owens pressed, folding her arms. "You didn't ask us for any documentation, and we've been here an hour and a half looking at aircraft worth $15 million. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Wealthy-looking customers wandered freely among the Gulfstreams and citations, while Hamza faced an inquisition simply for showing interest in aircraft, and at a lower price point. Different circumstances required different approaches, Vanessa offered weakly, the cracks in her logic showing, but her unwillingness to abandon the discriminatory stance still firm. Nina's live stream counter jumped, 3,800 viewers now. Aviation industry publications had begun tuning in, recognizing that the unfolding scene wasn't just bad optics for Apex Aeronautics. It was a story that could dent the reputation of luxury aviation as a whole. Outside, a cluster of flight students from the nearby training academy pressed against the glass, drawn there by social media posts about the confrontation. Their presence created an undeniable pressure inside. "Corporate monitoring shows elevated security concerns," Mercer announced, glancing at his phone for updates from headquarters. "We need to resolve this situation quickly and professionally." Hamza scrolled briefly through urgent notifications. Fleet maintenance reminder, 6 p.m. Insurance inspection scheduled Monday. Aviation Procurement Board call, Tuesday, 8 a.m. The messages were proof of deep industry involvement, but he chose not to display them. "Sir, we're going to need you to provide comprehensive documentation or conclude your visit," Mercer said formally. "Our security protocols require proper qualification for continued access." I've already provided identification and expressed genuine purchasing interest, Hamza replied. What additional documentation do you require? Financial statements, bank references, completed credit applications, proof of insurance capability. Blake rattled off eagerly. A list designed less for vetting and more for exhausting anyone who didn't fit the showroom's narrow profile of a real buyer. Security Chief Vega stepped in closer, not aggressively, but with the kind of presence that makes the air feel heavier. Sir, you'll need to cooperate with staff requests, or we'll have to ask you to leave the premises. The shift was clear. Browsing had now been redefined as a potential trespass offense. Timestamp, 45 minutes to close, Nina murmured into her stream. This has been going on for 40 minutes. Corporate has to be watching this. They were. Vice President Lisa Park sat in her office, watching the live security feed and recognizing the PR disaster in motion, but hesitating to step into a regional manager's handling of a situation. From the turboprop section, a wealthy cattle rancher wandered over, his boots worn but his presence unmistakably affluent. Son, he said to Hamza, I've been listening to your questions about the King Air's performance. Sounds like you've actually flown them. I have extensive experience with King Air operations, Hamza replied calmly. What kind of operations? Mercer asked, his tone skeptical. Agricultural applications, crop protection, aerial surveying, livestock management support. Blake's laughter was sharp and mocking. Right, the crop dusting story again. What's next? You own an airline. The casual insult revealed total ignorance of the scale and sophistication of agricultural aviation, a multi-billion-dollar sector requiring expert pilots and highly specialized aircraft. Dr. Owens lifted her phone, adding her own footage to the growing pile of documentation. This is discrimination, plain and simple. You're denying him service based on his appearance, not his qualifications. Ma'am, we're following established security protocols, Mercer insisted, but his voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. Nina's viewer count surged, 5,600 now, as major aviation organizations began quietly monitoring the feed. The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association had already flagged the incident. The PA chimed. 40 minutes to closing. All sales staff, focus on qualified prospects. Hamza now stood surrounded by Mercer, Blake, Vanessa, and Vega, institutional authority circling a single customer they had prejudged and dismissed. Multiple phones caught the visual, a well-spoken, industry-knowledgeable Muslim man in a public standoff with an entire showroom's chain of command. What they didn't know was that this unqualified visitor controlled one of the largest agricultural aviation operations in the region, with the industry influence to damage their careers and the technical credibility to expose their ignorance. The countdown continued, 35 minutes to closing. 35 minutes before the narrative flipped. 30 minutes to closing. The end-of-day procedures began. The closing announcement crackled through Apex Aeronautics' sound system as the air in the showroom reached a near-breaking point. Hamza Qureshi slowly reached into his jacket pocket. His movements were measured, deliberate, the kind of composure that comes from years of commanding respect in rooms far more intense than this one. The circle of sales staff, management, and security closed in, while customers and Nina's ballooning live stream audience leaned forward, sensing something big was about to happen. Nina's viewer count had hit 7,200. Aviation industry insiders, Muslim civil rights advocates, and corporate diversity officers were now flooding the comments. Major aviation publications were openly monitoring the stream, recognizing the potential for this incident to ripple far beyond one showroom. Hamza withdrew a sleek black leather credential wallet. He opened it with calm precision, the fluorescent lighting glinting off embossed gold seals. He extended the first card to Daniel Mercer with the subtle authority of someone used to holding the upper hand. Hamza Qureshi, airline transport pilot license, multi-engine land, 8,400 flight hours. Mercer read it aloud, his voice dropping almost to a whisper as the weight of the words hit him. The ADP license wasn't just any certification. It was the highest tier of pilot qualification in existence, the kind required to captain commercial airliners. Blake's complexion drained, the mocking smirk gone in an instant. That's an ADP, Vanessa stammered, recognizing the gold seal instantly. You don't get one of those without thousands of flight hours and grueling testing. The elderly cattle rancher who had backed Hamza earlier stepped closer, nodding in approval. Son, I figured you knew those planes a little too well. ADP means you can fly anything with wings. Hamza produced a second card, handing it to Mercer. Qureshi Aviation, Chief Executive Officer and Chief Pilot. The corporate letterhead bore the official markings of the Civil Aviation Authority, making Mercer's fingers tremble slightly as he held it. Nina's live stream exploded. Viewership shot from 7,200 to 15,400 in just over a minute. The comments scrolled so fast they blurred. He's legit. They're done. This is going viral. Mercer's eyes narrowed with dawning recognition. Qureshi Aviation. I've heard that name before. We are the largest agricultural aviation operation in the region, Hamza said, his voice now carrying a quiet authority that made everyone instinctively step back. 47 aircraft in our fleet, valued at roughly $89 million. The figures landed like back-to-back shockwaves. Blake's mouth moved soundlessly, his mind struggling to reconcile the crop duster he had mocked with a man who owned nearly twice as many planes as Apex Aeronautics had in its entire showroom. Dr. Owens moved closer, her satisfaction palpable. I told you, you can't fake that level of technical knowledge. Security Chief Vega eased backward, suddenly aware that his role in this confrontation had been to intimidate one of the most accomplished aviation entrepreneurs in the country. We specialize in precision agriculture applications, aerial surveying, and emergency response services, Hamza continued, tapping his phone to bring up Qureshi Aviation's corporate site. The screen displayed aerial shots of pristine aircraft lined up outside modern hangars, with maintenance bays that rivaled commercial airline facilities. Our annual revenue is approximately $47 million, Hamza said evenly. And we currently have an acquisition budget of $18 million for new aircraft this fiscal year. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, letting the number sink in. Cessna's corporate sales division recommended your dealership to me directly. Mercer's face went pale as the realization hit. The man they had tried to push out represented more revenue than the showroom usually generated in half a year. And it had all been seconds away from walking out the door. A young pilot from the flight school outside stepped into the showroom, curiosity written all over his face. Mr. Qureshi, is that really you? He asked, almost in disbelief. You spoke at our aviation safety seminar last month about precision agricultural flying techniques. The recognition from an independent, credible source erased any lingering doubt. The pilot's expression wasn't just polite. It was the look of genuine respect for someone he clearly viewed as an industry authority. Our operations are regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority under Part 137 guidelines, Hamza said, holding up his phone to display the official documentation. All of our flight crew maintain commercial pilot standards, with regular proficiency checks and medical certifications. Nina's camera caught every moment. The live stream now at 18,600 viewers, as institutional bias collided, visibly and publicly, with undeniable professional reality. Major news outlets had already embedded the feed on their sites. Qureshi Aviation provides aerial application services for Fortune 500 agricultural clients, Hamza continued, scrolling to the client section on his company's site. The list glowed with heavyweight names: John Deere, Cargill, Archer Daniels Midland. Government seals appeared further down. Contracts with the USDA and multiple state agriculture departments, proof of federal trust in his operations. Vanessa stepped forward, her earlier arrogance tempered by the magnitude of her miscalculation. Mr. Qureshi, we had no idea about your background. Ms. Morgan, that's exactly the problem, Hamza replied calmly, but with steel in his tone. You didn't ask about my qualifications. You assumed what I was capable of and what I could afford, based solely on my appearance. He tapped open another site, the Agricultural Aviation Association's Board of Directors page. His photo sat there alongside other industry leaders. I help set safety standards and operational protocols for the entire industry, Hamza said, his voice now carrying the weight of someone who not only worked within the system, but helped shape it. Blake visibly flinched. He had spent the last hour mocking a man whose decisions could influence regulations affecting their business. Our fleet includes King Air turboprops for executive transport, Cessna citations for client services, and specialized agricultural aircraft from Air Tractor and Thrush, Hamza explained, swiping through photos. The images were almost military in their precision, gleaming aircraft lined up in flawless formation, each worth more than most homes. The visual impact hit the staff hard. They had pegged him as someone who couldn't afford even a joyride, yet here he was, commanding a fleet that dwarfed their own showroom's inventory. Daniel Mercer fumbled for his radio, his tone clipped but shaken. Control Center, get Executive Vice President Park on site immediately. Priority 1. He turned away, his voice dropping but still audible to the crowd. The incident you've been monitoring, it involves the CEO of Qureshi Aviation. Nina's audience exploded with comments. Aviation schools were already discussing using the footage as a training case on professional respect, prejudice, and customer relations. Our annual aircraft maintenance budget alone exceeds $4.2 million, Hamza added, scrolling through his financial dashboard. We employ 67 people across 3 provinces, certified mechanics, pilots, agricultural specialists. Every word hammered home the reality. The man they had profiled as unworthy of attention was not just a legitimate customer. He was one of the most influential and financially significant clients they could ever hope to serve. And now, tens of thousands of people were watching live as they realized it far too late. The employment figures meant Qureshi Aviation wasn't just a successful company. It was a major regional employer with economic influence that reached far beyond aircraft purchases. Local politicians actively courted businesses with that kind of job creation power. Federal crop insurance requires certified aerial application for coverage eligibility, Hamza explained, his tone almost instructional now, as if giving a lecture. Our services protect billions of dollars in agricultural assets every single year. A circle of wealthy customers had gathered to witness the confrontation's finale, their phones raised to record what was already becoming legend in aviation circles. The image of prejudice colliding head-on with undeniable expertise was destined to circulate for years. We're currently evaluating 3 Cessna citations for our executive fleet expansion, Hamza continued, gesturing toward the aircraft he'd originally been inspecting. Today's visit was a preliminary assessment for an $8.4 million acquisition. The number hung in the air like a detonation. $8.4 million, more than Apex Aeronautics' typical annual sales volume, was now squarely at risk because of Blake's profiling. Qureshi Aviation has been featured in Flying Magazine, Agricultural Aviation Magazine, and Professional Pilot, Hamza added, swiping to glossy covers showcasing his aircraft and operations. We're recognized as leaders in precision agriculture technology. The media recognition meant his name and reputation carried weight across the entire aviation community. Any whisper of how this day unfolded would instantly reach industry players far beyond this showroom. Our safety record includes 0 accidents in over 40,000 flight hours of agricultural operations, Hamza said, pulling up official Civil Aviation Authority safety reports. We're insured through Global Aerospace, premiums reflecting our flawless operational history. Those credentials were the gold standard in aviation. Insurance companies didn't cover poor operators, and 40,000 hours without a single accident wasn't just rare, it was elite. The glass doors swung open, and Executive Vice President Lisa Park entered in a rush, her slightly disheveled appearance betraying the emergency drive from headquarters. She'd been monitoring the security feeds and social media chaos, fully aware she was stepping into a full-scale corporate disaster. Mr. Qureshi, she began, cutting past everyone. I want to personally apologize for this unprecedented failure in our customer service. This wasn't a failure in customer service, Hamza replied, his voice calm but carrying unshakable authority. It was systematic discrimination based on appearance, not qualification. Nina's viewer count hit 24,000. Aviation organizations around the world were now watching in real time as the contrast between Hamza's credentials and his treatment became a viral case study in institutional bias. Scattered applause began from one corner of the showroom, then another, until the sound swelled into a thunderous ovation. Witnesses celebrated not just the man's qualifications, but the humiliation of prejudice in the face of undeniable truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hamza said, addressing both the crowd and the thousands watching online, "this concludes an unfortunate demonstration of how assumptions can blind institutions to opportunity." Blake Harrington, Daniel Mercer, and Vanessa Morgan stood frozen, like exhibits in an uncomfortable museum display titled Discrimination in the Digital Age. Their careers in luxury aircraft sales were, for all practical purposes, over. But the ripple effects of this moment were only beginning. Lisa Park stood rooted in place, the weight of the world pressing down as she realized this was already being called the most expensive discrimination incident in aviation history. Hamza remained near the citation, his ADP license and executive credentials laid out on the wing like evidence in a corporate trial. On his phone, Qureshi Aviation's homepage gleamed, 47 aircraft lined up in military precision, their combined worth dwarfing anything in the showroom. "Ms. Park," Hamza said, his gaze unwavering, "catastrophic failures require comprehensive solutions." And with that, the power in the room shifted entirely. "Let's talk about the systemic issues that allowed today's discrimination to happen." Hamza lifted his tablet, the glassy surface reflecting the fluorescent lights as he tapped open a spreadsheet. Rows of figures appeared, real-time financial data that made Lisa Park's jaw tighten. "Qureshi Aviation operates with an annual budget of $47 million, he said. "Our aircraft acquisition fund currently holds $18 million, earmarked for fleet expansion." Nina's live stream had now surged past 31,000 viewers. Major aviation publications were providing live coverage, treating the moment as a historic example of corporate accountability playing out in real time. Comments poured in from pilots, aircraft manufacturers, and aviation executives worldwide. "Our comprehensive market analysis reveals troubling patterns in luxury aviation sales," Hamza continued, flipping to a series of graphs and charts. "Customer treatment varies dramatically based on demographic assumptions rather than financial qualifications." He handed Lisa a printed breakdown. Her hands shook slightly as she scanned the first page. The numbers were damning, a clear trail showing how Apex Aeronautics' current sales approach routinely eliminated qualified prospects through visual profiling, resulting in measurable revenue losses across multiple market segments. Daniel Mercer stood nearby, the full weight of his 15-year career collapsing in real time. Blake Harrington clutched his employee badge like it was a life vest, but anyone watching could see he was already drowning. "The aviation industry operates on reputation and referral networks," Hamza said, pulling up another screen that displayed membership rosters from multiple industry associations. "Today's discrimination doesn't just impact my company. It will influence our relationships across agricultural aviation, corporate flight departments, and aircraft manufacturing contracts." Park glanced down at her own tablet, pulling up crisis management protocols that suddenly felt inadequate for the scale of what she was facing. "Mr. Qureshi, what immediate actions could show our commitment to addressing these violations?" she asked. "Accountability starts with leadership," Hamza replied, turning slightly toward the staff members who had orchestrated 50 minutes of systematic profiling. "Mr. Mercer enabled discriminatory practices through poor supervisory oversight. Mr. Harrington violated basic customer service standards through overt bias." He swiped on his tablet again, revealing legal citations and precedent cases. Park's background in corporate law made her eyes narrow. She instantly recognized the scale of the liability exposure. "Ms. Morgan participated in customer profiling that violates federal civil rights protections in commercial transactions," Hamza continued. Security Chief Anthony Vega stepped forward, his demeanor more measured than the others. "Mr. Qureshi, I want to apologize for my part in this. I should have recognized how inappropriate the treatment was." "Chief Vega," Hamza said, his tone softening just slightly, "you were responding to management directives, not creating discriminatory policies. Your professionalism today will be noted in my communications with industry associations." The statement landed with the force of an industry-wide memo. Everyone in the room understood. Hamza wasn't just clearing his name. He was setting the stage for Apex Aeronautics to be remembered for the most expensive Islamophobia incident in aviation history. The distinction between following orders and creating bias was not lost on the aviation security professionals now watching Nina's live stream. Chief Vega's conduct, while complicit, would become a case study in how security officers could respond appropriately even within a flawed chain of command. Federal Aviation Authority diversity mandates require commercial aviation businesses to demonstrate inclusive practices, Hamza said, holding up his phone to show official FAA correspondence. Today's documented Islamophobic discrimination could trigger a regulatory review of Apex Aeronautics business practices. That landed like a cold slap. The federal implications were enough to make Lisa Park's expression tighten into something close to fear. FAA investigations would tear through every corner of their sales operation, potentially jeopardizing their dealer certifications and relationships with aircraft manufacturers. Our influence extends across the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, the National Business Aviation Association, and the Agricultural Aviation Association, Hamza added, displaying his board membership credentials on the screen. Tonight's incident will be discussed at upcoming industry conferences. The threat wasn't veiled. Aviation conferences attracted thousands of potential high-value clients, and discrimination stories traveled fast through professional networks where competence mattered far more than prejudice. Qureshi Aviation maintains vendor relationships with Cessna, King Air, and Gulfstream, Hamza continued, opening a series of emails from manufacturer representatives. Today's treatment reflects poorly on Apex Aeronautics dealer network standing. Nina's camera caught the exact moment Park realized the scope of the damage. Manufacturers didn't tolerate dealers who alienated qualified buyers. The luxury aviation market represents $4.8 billion annually, Hamza said, consulting an industry report. Discriminatory practices don't just reduce sales, they eliminate entire customer segments while creating massive legal liability exposure. He tapped again, bringing up live social media analytics. Hashtag Apex Aviation Discrimination was trending with over 180,000 mentions, 91% of them negative. Our economic footprint extends far beyond aircraft purchases, Hamza said, displaying Qureshi Aviation's vendor network. Our annual spending on fuel, maintenance, insurance, and services exceeds $12 million regionally. That meant dozens of service providers, many of whom relied on Qureshi Aviation's contracts, would soon be hearing the story. The Federal Equal Credit Opportunity Act extends to commercial aircraft financing, Hamza added, pulling up the relevant statute. Qualification bias based on religion or appearance violates federal anti-discrimination law. Daniel Mercer's phone was buzzing nonstop, calls from union reps, legal advisors, and industry colleagues who had already seen the viral footage. The legal exposure was growing by the minute. Overhead, news helicopters began circling. Cameras zoomed in on the glass-front showroom, capturing the most heavily documented Islamophobic discrimination case the industry had ever seen. Apex Aeronautics' annual revenue depends heavily on repeat customers and referrals, Hamza observed, scanning the company's own financial filings. Discrimination destroys both. Park was already scrolling through liability projections on her tablet, calculating just how devastating the lawsuits, manufacturer reviews, and regulatory investigations could be. Mr. Harrington's conduct represents a pattern of bias that likely affects other prospective customers, Hamza said, queuing up sections of Nina's footage that clearly showed his behavior. Federal civil rights violations require immediate, corrective action. Finally, Blake spoke, desperation cracking through his earlier arrogance. Mr. Qureshi, I have a family, 20 years in aviation sales. I was just following security protocols. Hamza fixed him with a level stare. Show me the security protocol that authorizes discrimination based on religion or appearance. Produce the training manual that tells staff to assume financial inability because of a customer's beard or traditional dress. The silence that followed was absolute, because no such protocol existed. Federal law prohibited exactly what Blake had been doing for years. Ms. Morgan's supervisory decisions actively enabled this profiling, Hamza continued, scrolling through personnel logs. Her response didn't correct the bias, it escalated it. Nina's audience had documented every minute of that negligence, creating a record that would soon be dissected in discrimination prevention training programs nationwide. Our timeline for comprehensive reform is non-negotiable, Hamza said, lifting a prepared document from his briefcase. You have 24 hours to deliver acceptable corrective measures to my office. Hamza outlined his demands with the cool precision of a boardroom veteran. Point 1. Immediate termination of employees directly involved in discriminatory conduct. Point 2. Comprehensive Islamophobia and bias training for all customer-facing staff. Point 3. Customer service monitoring systems designed to prevent future profiling. Lisa Park's tablet lit up with live financial projections. The reform costs were substantial, but the alternative, in the form of industry reputation collapse and federal liability, would be catastrophic. Point 4. Diverse hiring initiatives at both sales and management levels, Hamza continued. Point 5. Formal partnerships with aviation diversity organizations for ongoing prevention training and accountability. His tone was even, not punitive. These were corrective measures, strategic safeguards that would not only prevent future incidents, but demonstrate genuine commitment to inclusive, equitable customer service. Qureshi Aviation's industry relationships carry significant referral influence, Hamza added, bringing up a contact list that included senior decision-makers at Fortune 500 corporate flight departments. Our assessment of your response will determine future business recommendations. The referral threat was measured but devastating. Corporate flight departments often relied on industry recommendations for multi-million-dollar aircraft purchases. Losing Hamza's endorsement could cost Apex Aeronautics a sales pipeline they couldn't afford to lose. Ms. Park, Hamza concluded, his quiet authority somehow heavier than any raised voice could be. This incident is proof that assumption-based customer service creates more problems than profit. Competence comes in many appearances, and your business model needs to reflect that. By the time he left the showroom, the economic and reputational aftershocks were already unfolding. Sullivan, Harrington, and Morgan would never forget the day they learned that discrimination carries a price tag, one measured in careers, credibility, and industry standing. 24 hours later, the Apex Aeronautics corporate boardroom buzzed with damage control energy. Emergency stakeholders filled the long mahogany table. CEO Janet Kim sat at the head, scanning overnight reports. The data was brutal. Hamza's live stream had reached 4.2 million views across all platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, Kim began, her tone clipped. Yesterday's Islamophobic discrimination incident has triggered immediate, comprehensive reforms to our customer service protocols. Nina's original Instagram Live had become the most watched aviation accountability video in social media history. The hashtag Qureshi Aviation reveal was trending worldwide, sparking national conversations about assumption-based profiling in luxury markets. Blake Harrington has been terminated, effective immediately, Kim announced. Our investigation uncovered a clear pattern of customer profiling that violated both company policy and federal anti-discrimination laws. His dismissal had bypassed standard employment protections. Federal civil rights violations allowed no such delays. Daniel Mercer will face immediate demotion and mandatory bias training before any possibility of reinstatement, Kim continued, glancing at the disciplinary report. His supervisory negligence enabled systematic discrimination against qualified customers. 15 years of management experience had been stripped in a single board decision. Vanessa Morgan entered the conference room wearing a visitor's badge, her position as sales director eliminated during the overnight restructuring. I accept full responsibility for my role in yesterday's profiling, she said, her public acknowledgement recorded for industry-wide bias prevention training. Chief Vega, Kim said, turning toward him, has been commended for professional conduct in a difficult situation. His response will become the standard in de-escalation training across our dealership network. Vega's restraint had already been recognized by national aviation security bodies as exemplary performance under institutional pressure. The Qureshi standards launch Monday across all Apex Aeronautics locations, Kim announced, revealing the reform package. The rollout included 60 hours of mandatory diversity and anti-Islamophobia training for every customer-facing employee, developed in partnership with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee and the Muslim Advocates Organization, a program being positioned as an industry model for bias prevention. Finally, Nina Rodriguez entered the room as the newly appointed Director of Customer Experience. Her role: oversee transparency initiatives. Her footage had provided irrefutable proof of systematic bias, forcing the company into historic reforms. Real-time customer interaction monitoring begins immediately, Nina said, tapping her tablet to display the new AI-powered accountability dashboard. The system will flag potential discrimination patterns in real time for immediate managerial review. The reforms were expensive, public, and non-negotiable, but for Apex Aeronautics, survival now depended on proving that this incident would be the last of its kind. The technology represented cutting-edge bias detection developed by IBM's Watson team specifically for luxury retail environments. Dr. Samira Rahman, Kim announced, has accepted appointment as our independent bias prevention ombudsman. A former Department of Justice civil rights attorney specializing in religious discrimination cases, Dr. Rahman would have the authority to investigate any customer profiling complaints and recommend both policy overhauls and employee terminations. Her appointment sent a ripple of alarm through aviation sales organizations nationwide. The industry now understood that Apex Aeronautics' accountability process would include independent, federal-level oversight with real consequences. Federal Aviation Authority officials have commended our proactive response, Kim reported, reading from correspondence out of Washington. They are considering our reforms as a potential model for industry-wide standards. What could have been a regulatory nightmare had become a showcase for aviation sector accountability, and a rare example of proactive, private sector civil rights protection. Customer satisfaction scores have improved 18% since implementation began, Nina reported, tapping the dashboard to display the numbers. Eliminating discriminatory practices had not only improved the customer experience, it had increased sales efficiency across all demographic groups. The improvements weren't just optics. Removing religious and appearance-based bias from customer interactions increased revenue, customer retention, and loyalty among markets the company had historically ignored or undersold. Industry partnership initiatives begin next week, Kim announced, unveiling collaboration agreements with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, the Muslim Advocates, and Women in Aviation International. Apex Aeronautics would sponsor diversity scholarships, mentorship programs, and aviation career development opportunities aimed at breaking down the industry's historical homogeneity. 6 months from today, we'll conduct a full assessment of these reforms, Kim said. Success means progress and leadership. Failure means additional accountability measures. The oversight framework ensured that the reforms would be real, not hollow PR gestures. Federal officials had already begun citing Apex Aeronautics' turnaround as proof that private industry could enact change faster than government regulation alone. This incident proves that documentation, coupled with corporate accountability, creates immediate systemic reform, Kim told Aviation Week. Private industry can correct discriminatory practices faster than any federal agency. The transformation had exceeded expectations. In just 48 hours, leadership had converted institutional Islamophobia into a competitive advantage. Other aviation dealerships began voluntarily adopting Apex Aeronautics protocols, realizing that proactive reform was cheaper and far less destructive than the career-ending and reputation-shattering fallout they had just witnessed. Aviation sales exists to serve all qualified customers equally, Kim concluded in her stakeholder address. Yesterday's failure became today's foundation for industry excellence. The revolution was complete. Discrimination had been replaced by accountability, bias with opportunity, and prejudice with professional respect. Apex Aeronautics had learned that treating every customer with dignity wasn't just morally right. It was financially essential for long-term success in aviation. 1 year later, Hamza Qureshi stood before the International Aviation Diversity Summit, representing a movement that had reshaped aircraft sales protocols in 43 countries. Delegates from more than 300 aviation companies listened intently as he spoke. Excellence recognizes no barriers of faith or appearance in aviation, Hamza told them. When we demanded accountability, We didn't just change one company's policies, we created standards that now protect pilots, buyers, and aviation professionals across the globe. The applause was immediate and sustained. The numbers told an extraordinary story. Aviation discrimination complaints dropped 67% across dealerships that implemented the Qureshi standards. Customer satisfaction rose 42% in companies adopting bias monitoring systems, while sales to previously excluded demographics increased 38%. Nina Rodriguez's documentary, Wings of Justice. When Bias Met Accountability, premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, winning the People's Choice Award for Best Documentary Feature. Her citizen journalism had evolved into a powerful platform exposing religious and appearance-based discrimination across the luxury sales industry. One Instagram live stream changed everything. Nina reflected in Aviation Week interviews. It proves that ordinary employees can hold institutions accountable when they document injustice and demand professional integrity. The Qureshi Aviation Diversity Fund awarded $12.8 million in pilot training scholarships to underrepresented communities, producing 847 new licensed aviators who now serve in airlines, corporate flight departments, and agricultural operations worldwide. Chief Anthony Vega became a nationally recognized expert on aviation security protocols that protect rather than profile. His handling of the crisis inspired similar integrity-focused training programs across security departments in multiple industries. Professional accountability speaks louder than policy manuals, Hamza told students during his guest lectures at Harvard Business School. When discrimination affects careers and industry standing, institutions evolve rapidly toward excellence. Federal Aviation Authority officials officially adopted the Qureshi standards as recommended guidelines for all aircraft dealerships and aviation service providers. The U.S. Department of Transportation cited Apex Aeronautics transformation as proof that proactive accountability could prevent the need for federal intervention. These real-world outcomes prove that professional credentials, strategic action, and public documentation can dismantle institutional bias more effectively than litigation alone. Hamza's measured, fact-driven response created a wave of transformation stories that continue to inspire reforms across aviation and luxury retail. Stories like this demonstrate that when expertise meets authority, entire industries can be reshaped. Life stories of dignity, defended through professional excellence, prove that competence speaks a language no prejudice can silence. Even Blake Harrington, once the face of the incident, completed intensive bias training. Today, he works at a regional aircraft maintenance company, openly sharing his experience as a cautionary tale about assumption-based customer service. The ripple effects continue to grow. Every time an aviation professional treats a customer with equal respect, regardless of faith, appearance, or background, the legacy of the Qureshi standards lives on. The model has since spread beyond aviation into marine sales, luxury automotive, and high-end retail, with executives adopting similar accountability frameworks to drive institutional reform in premium markets. Real stories have real power, Hamza concluded at the International Aviation Diversity Summit. When we document bias and use professional authority strategically, we create the inclusive industries our diverse talent pool deserves. If you've experienced discrimination in aviation, automotive sales, or luxury retail, share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters. Your experience demands accountability. These stories of quiet expertise overcoming systemic bias must be amplified. Subscribe to Voices Uncut for more accounts of professional leaders confronting institutional discrimination. Together, we document injustice and build industries where qualifications matter more than assumptions.